Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on Diddy. What's next? We're talking about where he's at and what lies ahead for the man who went from international superstar status to convicted felon and who now is looking at years behind bars and multi-million-dollar legal bills. We're going to get into his ongoing legal issues, the hits to his reputation, and the efforts he says he's making to get beyond drug addiction and mental health concerns. Sean Diddy Combs' federal RICO sex trafficking trial made international headlines for months. At the end, a split verdict. Not guilty on the most serious charges that could have kept him locked up for life, but convicted on 2 counts of the least serious, transportation for prostitution. The feds asked for 135 months, that's over 11 years, while the defense asked for 14 months. Judge Arun Subramanian did not take sides, though, instead sentencing him to 50 months and a fine of $500,000. With time off for drug treatment and other incentives, he could end up spending less than 3 years in a federal prison.
This case was 100% a win for him because he is not doing a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years, nor is he looking at a life sentence, which were all on the table in regards to the sex trafficking and the RICO charges that he was facing this summer, but that he was ultimately acquitted of.
Diddy's blockbuster trial was neither complete condemnation nor complete exoneration, so his future prospects for rebuilding his public life after prison remain mired in uncertainty.
He really wants to maintain his status as somebody who is above. Even though right now he's in a lowly position, he definitely wants to be a light in his own way. And I think that's in a way positive, but also in a way it just speaks to his arrogance and who he is on the inside. That's never going to go away.
Many in the hip-hop community, even those who benefited from Diddy's business success, turned their backs on him. Now some are saying one of the few ways for him to redeem his reputation is if he turns into Preacher Puff.
I definitely hope that he comes out of this a different person, a new man. You know, I hope and pray that the time in jail becomes something transformative that allows him to understand his true power, his true influence.
We have an amazing panel to break this all down for us. Let's get right to it. Joining me is Asia Grace. She's a New York Post lifestyle reporter. Asia, great to have you with us again.
Always a pleasure, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Chuck Creekmur. He's the CEO and co-founder of allhiphop.com. Thank you very much for being with us again, Chuck.
Thank you.
And Phil Hamilton joins us. He's a criminal defense attorney as well as managing partner of Hamilton Clark LLP. Phil, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
Chuck, I want to start with you on this. How are you feeling now about where this whole case has gone?
I mean, it landed right about where I thought it would. You know, I didn't think that the prosecution was going to get what they were asking for, and I definitely didn't feel like the defense was going to get time served. I did notice there was not as much support in New York City as I expected for Diddy. I thought it was going to be more of a zoo. I thought it was going to be more support, but there was support, but not nearly as much as I thought, especially on the date of sentencing. But I think that there were a lot of eyes opened after all of this has come out. I also think that there are very mixed feelings and a lot of, opinions that may not fully line up with the support.
Asia, what about that? Because you talked about how, people have talked about the alleged victims on social media. Is it possible to have, on the one hand, maybe this guy was really put through the ringer legally, but he wasn't the best guy in the world. He deserved some kind of punishment. But on the other hand, there's that whole people wanting to have sympathy for women going through abuse in their personal and intimate relationships. What kind of sense are you getting about people's feelings now?
Lisa, in the 2000s, Diddy sang those infamous lyrics, "It's bad boy for life," not realizing that it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And honestly, since the onset of this trial, and throughout the sentencing and probably until he walks into that prison cell and beyond, social media sheriffs, if you will, are like virtually spanking Diddy for being exactly what he called himself, a bad boy. They're not necessarily taking into account all of the different things that his defense team tried to throw out there. They're really wanting to see and have wanted to see some justice served on behalf of his abuse victims and those that he's wronged and harmed. And surprisingly, a lot of people, even though there was a lot of support for Diddy outside of the courthouse and even on social media, people are saying, well, 4 years really isn't enough. They're actually wanting more years tacked on for the alleged bookings that he had lined up around the time of his sentencing, where he was supposedly going on speaking engagements, thinking he was going to get right out. So people think that's like extremely audacious, like the audacity of it all, I should say. But what's even more surprising is really the perception of Cassie and how social media has somewhat kind of turned on her. A lot of people did view her as a victim, and they, really cheered her on for going against this Goliath of a person. But once the trial came out, certain things came out in the court, and while she was on the stand, a lot of people just kind of took that back and said, well, she should be getting time. She should be the one that's, also held responsible for some of her involvement in Diddy's dealing. So it's very interesting how quickly the Insta world, the TikTok world, Twitter, all of that kind of turns on people.
How do you look at the sentencing? Because the defense didn't get what they wanted and the prosecution didn't get what they wanted.
I mean, Lisa, the defense at the end of the day got everything that they wanted, because that man wasn't facing a 15-year mandatory minimum for having gone down on the sex trafficking, let alone what he could have been looking at for the RICO. I mean, the man was looking at up to a life sentence. And as I just said, the mandatory minimum of 15. So 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, at the end of the day, Diddy cares, but as an attorney, I'm looking at that like I did everything I possibly could do. We clearly know, I mean, Lisa, you were covering that trial. We were talking a lot throughout it. There was nothing the man could do about the Mann Act convictions, about the bringing in prostitutes across state lines. There was nothing that could be done about that. I mean, it had essentially been conceded almost by the defense in many respects, because they were focusing so much on those heavier charges. So he got 4 years. I mean, his federal sentencing guidelines on these particular charges, we're looking at around 6 to 7 years. But the thing with the feds is, just because those are your sentencing guidelines, it doesn't mean that that's what a judge has to give you. He was facing anywhere between 0 to 10 years on each count. The government, to your point, Chuck, was looking for around 10 plus years. The defense was certainly hoping that he'd be out and able to be at his speaking engagements this week. 4 years at the end of the day, he should have been up, jumping and clapping as much as he was back in the summer, because you didn't get the 6 or the 7 that the guidelines were ultimately saying that you could get. You do your time, Fed time, you're generally doing 10 months on every 12. So if he got 50 months, that's about 40 months, then add those extra 2 months. We already know he's done about 13, 14 months. So if you subtract that from 42, then you're down to somewhere around 28, 29 months. That's 2.5 years. He could potentially get credit because he essentially all but conceded he's a drug addict throughout the course of the entire trial. So maybe some First Step Back credits. I mean, this man could be in a halfway house in as short as 2 years, maybe even a little less. You never know how those Bureau of Prisons calculations are going to work out. But at the end of the day, the man won all across the board, even if we're not going to see him free for the next couple of years.
Asia, in terms of the way the media was handled by Team Diddy, some people said they could have been doing a lot more to put different spins on things early on. Other people saying that they did the right thing by just really shutting it all down, except for the chaos that was going on outside the courtroom and on the streets there and across the internet. What's your take on that?
Diddy's defense team really used his children as his social media, if you will. They were in the front at the courthouse, and they were, coming as a unit to almost every a court hearing. There was definitely a strong push for this is a father. He's a family man. He's hands-on. And some of the 7 children he have, they no longer have a mother. So they need him. They need him. And listen, it's very true that, after the age 18, you still do need your parents. I'm not sitting here suggesting that those children don't, but 6 out of those 7 children are over the the legal age. And, I think that they try to, throughout the trial and even during the sentencing, I think that Diddy's team gave the judge like this old footage of him as a dad playing with the twins and just kind of being the hands-on guy he really wants the world to believe he is. And again, it might not be a full-on lie, but just because you are a dream daddy to your children does not mean that you weren't truly a nightmare partner and or boss to a number of people that had to deal with you for the last 20 plus years. So yes, your children did what they needed to do. Your mother, you had some major hip hop and R&B figures, including Carisha, aka Young Miami from the City Girls, including Carl Thomas. Others that we've heard have, penned letters to the courts begging for mercy. But when it comes down to it, whether you're a dad, whether you're a mogul, whether you're a millionaire, that doesn't excuse you from the law. And I think that Diddy and the rest of the world is now learning that.
Chuck, what about this portrayal of Diddy in court that Asia just mentioned of him as kind of father of the year? Because that 11-minute video that they showed in court, people were like, Lisa, what do you think about that? I said, well, I noticed two things, because a lot of the charitable work he did was during which, Chuck, you were aware of and covered a lot of it too. The Diddy runs a city, the building the schools for the kids, focusing on education, the empowering young Black boys, all of that. That was in very early years, like the early 2000s, when he was in New York. Now he's saying in prison he's found his true calling again, and he's created a course, supposedly a 6-week entrepreneurial course for the other detainees at MDC, and said, if you guys don't fight, if you don't stab each other, if you don't try to stab me, which reportedly what happened at one point, according to his attorney, but that I'll teach you this course. What do you make of this kind of move towards redemption?
Well, I think, whenever you get caught doing something, it changes how you deal with yourself and the consequences. So, I personally, I believe that it was a very well put together and effective device in court. A lot of reactions, a lot of tears, a lot of emotion. People were saying amen and whispering and sobbing even. But I'm not sure how much it lines up with reality, to be honest with you. And I would love to know the backstory to each and every part of the 11-minute video, because I think that if you hear the whispers, maybe they're not so loud, and they're certainly not said aloud in court. But I do think it was effective in court, emotionally, legally. Maybe it was a little effective as well. To me, the judge's demeanor early on, excuse me, was one way, and then after the kids testified or read their statements, and after that 11-minute video ran, he sounded slightly different.
Phil, in terms of the video, how is that an unusual tactic? I mean, this sentencing took nearly the whole day. The court staff and the court officers and the marshals, they were ready, all set to bring everybody back on Monday if they had to. But how unusual was that whole process, having so many people speak for him, having the kids there, having Diddy himself talk, having this video? Give us a sense of that, because you tried a lot of these federal cases.
Yeah, I mean, a federal sentencing is generally going to take you anywhere between an hour to, at the most, 2.5. I mean, that's the longest one that I've seen. So this one is exponentially long and unique, as regards just typical federal sentencing. The video stuff, that is something that you're starting to see a little bit more of now that we're in 2025, but it does typically tend to be more reserved for your higher profile defendants. And to that end, I guess if I had to give an opinion, you have to remember, Judge Subramanian, he's in there not only dealing with the Diddys of the world, but he's also just dealing with the indigent clients that can't afford an attorney, that are either represented by federal defenders or maybe an attorney on the CJA conflict panel, that don't have the money and the resources and the things like that to put forth the video. So I don't want to say that the videos come across as cringe, but it's the elephant in the room for me just to kind of point out, because it is kind of you flouting your wealth and your resources in a courtroom, dealing with a judge who 98% of the time when he's sentencing defendants, they don't have those resources. So he's not going to give you credit for the immaculate presentation, or that in some way, this video, I was going to give him 7 years, but man, it was so compelling. Let's go ahead and bring that down to 4. If I had to put money on it, he pretty much knew that he was going to give the 4 years. And as I reiterate, that's a win all day.
Chuck, you've spoken out and you've talked with us on this very show about mental health, and especially for men. Was there anything about what Diddy said that made you feel like, okay, maybe this guy had issues, untreated trauma, as they claimed in court? Or where do you stand on that now?
I think people that want to do better do better. When you know or feel something is wrong, you do something about that. Particularly if there are children involved, or particularly if you have responsibilities. I think that that's what I feel. How Diddy felt or feels is another story. But for me, I felt that those things were devices used to perhaps sway the judge. Again, when you're living your life and you feel like you can't be touched or you can't get caught, you live very differently. And Diddy's gotten out of a lot. He has been in these predicaments before and has gotten out unscathed. And so I think that there was a strong view that he was going to walk out of court. We know that he had the booking this week, and that is, more than a strong indication. I think they were sure they were going to walk out of court.
No, they were. And Phil, what about that? How does that look to a federal judge? Because at the sentencing where they were talking about, well, he has these speaking engagements set up. What do you think of those kind of things?
The government was all over it in their arguments, because they were just saying that, it's the height of hubris for him to come into sentencing with some engagements already booked and planned for the next week out of state. Their argument just being he's not even taking this process seriously. He's just looking at this as some formalistic day with which he has to appear. You're going to let him out and he's going to get on with his life, whatever that may be, whether it's speaking engagements, whether it's more baby oil or something in between. That's the way that they presented the argument in front of the judge, right? And in terms of like how the court ends up taking that, on the one end, I can see why the defense had to do it, because you hit the nail on the head. They were trying to say, like, look, he's trying to get out and do good things. Right. So give him that credit. That's a part of his characteristics that should be taken into account. He's not trying to go out here and, just do whatever. He's really trying to already start the process of giving back to the extent that the court is inclined to let him out. Maybe they didn't fully appreciate how the government could flip that back on them just to say that he's coming in haughty and arrogant, right, and disrespectful of the process.
Asia Grace, when you look into your New York Post crystal ball there, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we've seen some stars come back from some and politicians too come back from some pretty big things. But what do you think is ahead for Diddy? Like, what are the possible routes, career paths you see?
Well, like you said, Lisa, we have seen VIPs go from Prada to nada, from risen to prison. So the world is really their oyster when they go out of jail. And we come out of jail or prison. And we've seen Martha Stewart. We've seen Teresa Giudice. We've seen Little Kim. We've seen Bobby Shmurda. There's so many people who've had these timeouts, if you will, and come back and they've, reinvented themselves. They've retained and regained, this momentum, this grip on pop culture. And, we'll see if Diddy has that same stain. Unfortunately for him, his crimes and the allegations made against him are very heinous. And by the time he does get out, if he is to do the full 4-year sentence, he'll be closer to 60. So when he comes out, music, fashion, and spirits might not be there for him. The crowd might not want him in that space. So he might have to get creative. Maybe he'll come out and rebrand some kind of prisoner Pilates thing, or a lot of criminals, they go into jail and they come out and they do this whole culinary arts rebrand for themselves. So maybe we'll have some Puff Daddy patties or at some point, who knows. Either way, I believe that Mr. Can't Stop, Won't Stop, will not stop. He'll find a way. to edge himself back in there.
He will definitely find a way. Chuck, what do you see ahead with your extensive hip hop knowledge and background?
I've said it before and I'm saying it again. He's going into the ministry. He's going to be a preacher. It's the safest space for him as long as the sex registry will allow it. He will be a preacher because that's the place where you go when you want total forgiveness. Despite, whatever your views on the church are, he's going to do that because I know that church folks will take anyone in and baptize them, and then you're born again. That's my prediction.
Having seen people go through these types of cases, what do you see ahead for him? Like what are the possible routes forward after doing that time?
Yeah, Asia and Chuck, I think they hit the nails on the head. Whatever he ends up doing, I think it's open for him. We've seen him remake himself. We've seen him come back to life. I remember with Making the Band, around 2003, that was post the J-Lo thing. That was post his, high 97, 98, 99 years. It was like he was kind of on a little decline, and then boom, Making the Band.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on what lies ahead for Diddy. You can watch it again and share it on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page and the Fox Local app. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.